I'm sure you've heard this a few times now, but I don't think Back for Blood is ready to release this October. Let's talk about why. Before we begin, I just want to preface this video by saying that I do genuinely think that the game is fun and it has a lot of potential. This is just going to be about its flaws and the amount of polish it has, considering that it's going to come out very soon. Like every other Left 4 Dead fan, I was so hyped when Back for Blood was first revealed. But now that everyone's had a chance to play the game, what exactly does this do better than this? Let's start with the obvious. The game looks great. There's not much else I can say about it. It's pretty atmospheric. It'd probably be pretty terrifying if the game was survival horror. There's also apparently going to be a lot of levels on release, but I'll believe it when I see it. There's also a wide range of weapons you can use, and almost all of them feel useful in some way, especially in higher difficulties where you'll probably want at least one sniper rifle in your group. The special enemies are, for the most part, fine, I guess. They're all pretty threatening and they each have their own little variants. The variants have their own unique weak points as well. Not that it matters much right now because hitting it can be either easy or just unnecessarily hard due to lag or just the janky animations in general. Like you'd be aiming at their weak points and there's gonna be like, you can't hit me. You know what? Let's just get straight to my complaints. Back 4 Blood just doesn't give us anything that we haven't already seen before. And just to be fair, I'm not gonna compare it solely with its spiritual predecessor. Here are two other 4-player co-op games that are just fantastic and offer similar-ish content at a lower price. So my first complaint with the game is with its melee combat. Melee in Back 4 Blood just feels like absolute ass. It's like you're trying to kill things with a pool noodle. It doesn't feel impactful, you barely deal any damage unless you're using the hatchet or the fire axe, which are somehow just infinitely stronger than literally any other melee weapon in the game. Honestly, even the guns don't feel satisfying for various reasons, but I'm singling out melee because of how exceptionally bad it is in comparison. In Back 4 Blood, melee just feels completely useless unless you're building for it. And we're gonna come back to that later because the decks are just another problem that I have with it. But yeah, unless you're building an entire deck centered on smacking things around the entire campaign, it's just not gonna be useful. You may as well just never equip your melee weapon, it's just not gonna be good. There's also the lackluster gore. I mean, it's a zombie game, come on, at least make kills feel satisfying. I mean, really, it's very disappointing. Like, you shoot a zombie, they just ragdoll. That's it. They're like NPCs in Oblivion, they just go, I mean, come on, they made pipe bombs feel like wet farts. It just baffles me how lazy it is. Zombies just look like paid actors waiting for the cue. Like, do I die now? Damage-wise, the explosives are actually pretty useful, especially against the specials. But as far as using them, they're just so underwhelming. Another issue I have with the game is the trauma system. Basically, it's a mechanic that reduces your maximum HP if you fail to heal a certain amount of the damage you've taken recently. It's a decent concept because it makes you actually care about not getting hit. It actually makes your teammates more mindful of their positioning, especially in modes where friendly fire is a thing. My problem with it is that it's just way too punishing right now considering how frequently the game throws specials at you, and also the lack of ways to actually heal from it. As far as I know, the only way to heal from it, at least right now, is by using one of the med stations that just randomly spawn around the map. I've heard that med kits are gonna be buffed to address this issue though, and I'm pretty sure at least one of the characters and the cards that come with it are gonna be able to heal trauma or at least prevent trauma damage. So I guess we'll see. We'll see on launch, I guess. Going all the way back to the special enemies, they just feel a little too overpowered for how frequently the game just throws them at you. And it's hard enough for like the average player to kill one tall boy. Now imagine 3 of them running at you at the same time. I mean, even with a full group of coordinated players with decent builds, an encounter like that is still gonna drain your resources to some degree. And there's no guarantee that the AI director won't just do it all over again in the next minute. Now don't get me wrong, I have no problem with the game having like threatening specials that have obvious weaknesses. It's just that the way they behave right now, coupled with how the maps are designed, they're just not fun to deal with. They'll sometimes spawn beside you, and despite having like somewhat distinguishable sounds that alert you of their presence, it's probably already too late by the time you hear it because they're probably already attacking you or just spitting at you from afar. The bruisers are the worst when it comes to this because not only do they hide their weak spots behind their backs, these big lumbering brutes can just kind of sneak up on you. And they're incredibly difficult to kite because of how narrow the levels are. They're usually accompanied by a horde or even more bruisers, which just exacerbates the issue. They're essentially bullet sponges that'll whittle down your team's max HP if they get close enough. If the game spawns one while your team's in a tight spot, you better have a grenade handy because Big Papa's about to pound your ass. Another major offender is the Wretch, which can somehow vomit at you from a long range. Like, they can deal a decent amount of damage to you before you can even react. I mean, not only does their vomit feel like you're being hit with a sniper rifle, it also leaves a pool of acid behind, which just deals even more damage. And good luck dealing with the trauma after that. The game will also occasionally add a thick fog to the map, so now you can get sniped with little to no counterplay. It probably doesn't help that the AI teammates are just absolutely useless, especially when you get pinned down by special enemies. I'm not even gonna explain any further, because I think it's just better if I show you what I mean.
What are you doing all the way back there?
Come on, Evangelo. Over there. Let's go, Hall.
Finally, there's the deck building system. Here's the thing. The more I played the beta, the more I understood exactly how it works, and I actually like it. It's not deep or complex or anything. It's not even unique because I've seen similar systems in other co-op shooters like Payday 2, Killing Floor, etc. But I do have issues with how Back 4 Blood implements the system, especially with the rate in which you acquire cards in a run. You can have up to 15 cards in your deck, but you only start off each run with 2 cards, and you only get to add 1 card after each level. At this rate, you can only really complete your build near the end of the campaign, if not at the end of the campaign. I'm not asking for them to give players access to their entire deck right off the bat, but it just seems kind of counterintuitive to give players the opportunity to make these wild, unique decks, yet have their experiences be nearly identical until, like, I don't know, halfway through a run. I tried to make a tanky, melee-centered build with the cards that I've already unlocked, and it just never really felt impactful until probably a few levels in each campaign. By then, I'm already relying on some random gun that I just picked up off the floor because I still don't have the cards that make this melee playstyle viable. I feel like something along the lines of having more than one starter card would be a decent enough compromise to just have builds matter right off the bat. Going back to melee builds, until you unlock the later supply lines, you're pretty much required to use the card that changes your useless bash into a knife. Unless you can find a hatchet or a fire axe in the game, which is just based on pure luck, you're pretty much gonna want that knife card because it's gonna be better than literally any of the other melee weapons that the other characters start with. I understand that the game is trying to be a roguelite. You don't have to lecture me on that. I'm very familiar with the genre. But with the way it works right now, the deck system just feels like a very poorly thought out skill tree, especially since it's not even randomized in any way. If we don't consider the fact that you can sometimes find and buy cards in some of the levels, you already know exactly what you're gonna get throughout each run, and you can control what exactly you're gonna get next. Because again, it's not randomized. The cards that appear at the start of each level are already in order of how you put them in your deck. It's worth noting that this part of my criticism comes from the perspective of someone who didn't really grind for all of the cards, because I just didn't have the time to do so, especially since most of my games ended due to connection issues or just questionable teammates.
Brother, reload!
Didn't think you'd be down to us.
Man, I feel like shit.
Damn you, Walker. We're a team. Just me now, huh? Out of the park. What are we gonna do with you?
This face? This is my
Thanks,
grateful
hon.
face.
From what I've seen, some of the cards that you can unlock later on give like really crazy buffs that are balanced out by certain debuffs, and that's great. I think that's probably the reason why we can only have 2 cards at the start. My problem with that is that you need to grind for a significant amount of time to even get some of these good cards. Like, I'm not even talking about just playing the campaign a couple of times. I'm talking about a time investment of like maybe 20 to 30 hours for the average player. Now, I'm not saying that the game's hard because of this, because you can definitely breeze through even veteran difficulty with just a starter deck, as long as your teammates aren't playing with their elbows or just trying to speedrun the game like it's Left 4 Dead. I'm more concerned with how long it takes to actually reach the point where you can effectively specialize in various roles. You have to consider that the majority of the player base will be playing with random teammates, and you just can't predict what they're gonna do or what decks they're gonna be running. As of making this video, the game's set to release in like less than 2 months, so what we saw in open beta is very likely what we're gonna get. You'd probably also want to wait and see how the microtransactions in the game will work. Even if the devs say that it's purely cosmetic, we're talking about the developers responsible for Evolve, and we're talking about the publisher responsible for Shadow of War. So, yeah, Anyway, that's really all of my complaints, and that's all for this video, I guess. If you want to hear more of my ramblings or maybe some reviews on various indie games, feel free to subscribe, because there's gonna be more of that in the near future. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Now that everyone's had a chance to play the game, what exactly does this do that this can't do? No. Am I even pointing at the right things? Okay, let me just center myself. Point the mic here. Okay.